Hey, Keith Worrall with Outdoors First Media. Out on the water on a small lake in northern Wisconsin. Some of my favorite bodies of water to fish. Small lakes, 3, 4, 500 acres and less. What we're going to be doing with these spinnerbaits is we're going to be targeting pike and bass in shallow water. As you can see, you got a lot of trees, a lot of weeds coming up. The fish that we're going to be targeting is in, can be anywhere from 6 inches of water all the way out to the edge, which is about 1.5 to 2 feet at the thickest part of the weed line here. Early spring, we're going to be hitting pike, bass, and trying to get them on spinnerbaits. We're going to be using 1/4 to 3/4 ounce spinnerbaits today. That's your typical bass size spinnerbait, single blade or doubles. Today we're going to be using mostly singles with number 6 to number 8 Colorado blades on them. What I want to do is just show you how we're going to work these lures in the shallows to put more fish in the boat. One of the main keys to pitching spinnerbait shallow is keeping that rod tip up and keeping it moving. As soon as that bait hits the water, you've got to be on that reel and you've got to keep it moving. You can see the bait just hit the water. I got my rod tip up. Get it up, just kind of skip it over those weeds. Get it out to the outside edge. Slow it down a little bit. Let it go down 1.5 feet or so. Bring it in. Always do an L if you can at the side of the boat. You never know if there's a fish following it. That's a big mistake a lot of people make. If they don't do that L, there's an opportunity at losing a fish right there. I'm pitching that stuff right up in the snot. Just kind of popping it through, hopping it. Slowed it down a little bit when I got up to the outside edge. Once you get it out of that slop, slowing it down is a big key because a lot of times those fish are chasing it. If they didn't hit it up in that shallow stuff, they're going to work their way out and they're going to smoke it on the outside edge. Slowing it down a little bit gives them a little bit more time to react and attack it. Don't be afraid to really pop it too. I mean, if you're going through a lot of thick stuff, bass and pike are not afraid to eat something that's making a lot of noise and really tearing up the water. Pick and poke at little holes, any little spot where you can see a spot where that bait can land, try to hit it. I kind of pop that rod a little bit as it's going over the top of the weeds. Kind of jerk it forward a little bit and reel at the same time. That'll kind of float that lure over the top of the weeds. That way, if you try to reel straight through them, you're just going to have weeds on your bait all day long. Another thing you can do too is you cover all the water. You got an outside edge, like right now I've got the boat facing in towards shore. And I've been pitching up into the shallow stuff. I got a fish. That's how it's supposed to work. What I did is I pitched out on the outside edge. My dragger's a little loose on this rod, but ended up with a decent bass. I pitched up in that shallow and didn't have any hits. So by keeping the tip of the boat in, nose in towards the weed line like this and pitching down the edge, you can pick off these guys that are on the outside, not in shallow. As you can see, the tip of the boat is facing into shore the entire time. I've got a little bit of a wind that's going along the lake, kind of blowing me towards shore. If it's not blowing you straight in, you can use that angle the wind's blowing at to just push your boat back out constantly. As you go in, you step on a trolling motor, push it back out, and that wind's going to just work you down the shoreline. And that way you're facing at it the whole time. You're not trying to pitch sideways, you're not trying to pitch behind you, and you got the entire front of the boat to work that water. Now I sure popped it. Right, because it's the northern. Rolled himself up in that. on the outside edge. Slowed it down a little bit, came up and ate it. Now, one of the things you definitely want to keep in mind when you're fishing shallow is making sure you've got a decent leader. If you're going to be fishing real clear water, I'd recommend going with at least a 20 to 25 pound fluorocarbon leader. You're going to be bringing it through a lot of this stuff, bouncing it off of trees, branches, things like that. Fluorocarbon leader or a 7-strand at least steel leader. That way your line's not going to get frayed up or cut, and if you get a pike on, you're going to get it to the boat. I'm fishing with 30 pound braided line on this bait cast setup. You know, you might say, why 30 pound? Well, it kind of goes back to the same concept of why I would recommend you use a leader. That line also is getting rubbed on stuff. You can see a lot of times if you're reeling it through, it's going to be bouncing off of weeds, tree branches, whatnot, sometimes 4 or 5 feet above the leader. A little bit heavier line, a little bit better abrasion resistant, and you can catch trees like this and get it right off. Perfect. And not have to worry about breaking your line. You can get away with as light as 12 pound test, mono, for bass and pike doing this, but then you for sure want to have a leader. I'm going to try to show you something that I've learned over the years for getting your lure back if you cast over a branch. Not always do you do that on purpose, but every now and again that's what happens. I've got a branch kicked off the top of this tree. This is going to be a tough one to try because it's got branches that kick off all over. But I'm going to pitch it over that branch. I'm working it back. I got it here. I'm just going to pop that lure. If you keep reeling, when it comes around that branch, what it's going to do is it's going to wrap 2 or 3 times, and you're going to have to go in and get that bait. You bring it up slow over the top of the branch, work it up halfway, and give it a good pop when it's not moving anymore. 90% of the time, it's going to roll back and come right to you. That fish smoked it right on the edge, and it's a decent pike. Your hand line and pike. Never ever grab the line and wrap your hand around it. If you wrap your finger around braided or mono, you'll end up cutting that. It'll cut right through your finger. That fish smoked that spinnerbait as it hit the edge. When I was telling you earlier to slow that bait down, I picked up, went through the slop, got to the edge, slowed it down just a little bit, and he smoked it. Not a real big bass, but that is why you throw spinnerbaits. Bass, rip pike.
Just dumping that spinnerbait along.